Hey everybody, we are Francis, Martin, and Robert, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Welcome back to Snakes and Otters. This is episode 17. I'm Francis in the captain's chair.
I'm Robert.
I'm Martin.
We wanted to do something called Our Heroes, something that's very personal to all of us. It's not just an important historical person or somebody that is noteworthy for whatever reason, but it's someone in history that speaks to each of us and defines what we believe are heroic qualities. Somebody that's worth your knowing because we have found them to be an inspiration or something for us that really matters. And I get to do the first one this time, and I had to pick my favorite. And that's Thomas More, Sir Thomas More, or St. Thomas More, if you wish. And we're going to talk a little bit about him for this episode. And I'm going to try and explain to all of you all why he's important. And hopefully all of us can kind of delve into that and see what is it about him that's so good. So, Thomas More. He was born in the 1468. He grew up during the War of the Roses. We know him at the end in 1535 when he got his head chopped off by Henry VIII. That's kind of how most of us know him. We've probably seen the movie A Man for All Seasons, Best Picture, 1966.
If you haven't, go see it or rent it,
download it, absolutely. Whatever. Although I will step out.
You got to sling that beast.
Well, actually, I think as good as that one was, yes, it won Best Picture. Paul Scofield is awesome. It's the Charlton Heston TNT version that really put its hooks in me in 1988.
Really? That's funny because just prior to the show, I was just saying to Martin that I liked the movie version better.
Absolutely.
Really? Not the filmed play. It's almost blasphemy that he doesn't like the Chuck version.
I love the Chuck version. I just like the movie better.
Well, there are certain reasons for that.
It's an Olivier, right?
No. Paul Scofield. Paul Scofield plays him. Yes, no.
My apologies.
Yeah, although what you might be remembering is Orson Welles does have a very short part at the beginning as Cardinal Wolsey in the movie. Yes. And John Gielgud does it in the Chuck version that's done in 1988. But the Charlton Heston version is done because Ted Turner wanted to launch the TNT television network at that time, and he and Charlton Heston were big buddies. And Charlton Heston was, in his words, I know politically they're about as far apart as several galaxies, but they were big buddies. And
Chuck always admired big personalities like Ted Turner.
Right.
He was always attractive.
And Charlton Heston was at that time still considered to be one of those what he would call a 1,000-pound gorilla. A big star. So if you could get somebody like him to do something for you, that matters. So he's trying to launch that. And Chuck had played More on stage in the 80s, and he wanted to do a full-on adaptation of the play into a movie, which is not what Paul Scofield did. It was a major motion picture based on the play. Yes, the playwright's the one that actually did the screenplay, so most of it's the same. And yes, I can see why you might like the movie version better because it has all the cinematography and the outside spaces. It's bigger because it's done that way. Whereas it's the TNT TV movie is very much a stage play done on film.
And that's probably one of the reasons why I'm not as big on the play, because I believe plays are meant to be seen in person.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would have loved to have seen Charlton Heston play him in an actual live theater.
I think that plays done for the screen just don't come off as well as they do in person. So
there's almost no point. You might as well do it as an actual...
Right. If you're going to go to the trouble of filming it and doing costumes and sets, go all the way.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I like to kind of start out with the movie, it's where I started.
Yes.
I happened to see it on its original airing when it was first aired, and this was 1988. And I was at home. I was by myself, my first apartment actually, and I had no interruptions. And I was fascinated by it. I absolutely was fascinated by it. I recorded it to audio. I would listen to it constantly. I've got it almost memory. Don't laugh. But I've almost got the darn thing memorized. I love it so much.
Those cars in the 90s had those tape decks, you had to listen to something.
That's exactly right. And I became fascinated by him. And we knew of him. I knew of him. You know, you kind of know the story a little bit about how he gets in trouble with King Henry. But that is not even the beginning of all that he did. Fortunately, he was a prolific writer of his time. They finally published the last of his complete entire corpus of works in 1997. It took from 63 to 97, 15 volumes. They are huge. That's the Yale University did that. Although many of his works you can buy them in paperback in a very accessible formats as well. It's just that this includes all his correspondence, which is a fascinating subject that you could go into. He coined the phrase utopia because it's named after the book that he wrote. Utopia and utopian, that's more completely. The ideal society that he wrote. It's the only novel that he actually wrote, although it was a commentary on political life. He was doing Jonathan Swift long before Jonathan Swift was ever born. Social commentary on that.
In many ways, he was a man of the times, which is the Renaissance. And granted,
right.
England comes to the Renaissance a little bit later than the rest of the continent, but he's a Renaissance man. You know, according to one of the websites for him, he was not just a lawyer, but he was also a journalist.
That's correct. Yes.
As well as a writer, a very prolific writer. Although back then, men of means or men of stature were all prolific writers.
And it's his lawyer's training. And his father was a judge in London. He studied at Oxford and Cambridge. He got his lawyer degree. He went to work for the City of London for a while. He was well known within that arena for a while, but came to the eye of the royal court, and at the age of 42 went into the king's service. And from there, his rise was pretty meteoric, only because he was so darn good at what he did. He was he was a lawyer and a statesman. He was unmatched. But he was also very much a devout individual. We have to understand, one of the things that fascinates me about More is church and state are the same thing for him. They're exactly the same. And his devotion to the church and his devotion to the state, he sees no dichotomy there. We as Americans can't understand that. We see them as oppositional, but he did not.
No, but as a Catholic of his time,
that's correct.
It would have been unnatural to separate church and state.
That's right. But because he is on the cusp of great societal change in this area, he comes across as being unique when in fact he was not for his times. He is certainly just more prolific than those around him.
And he does come to odds with the state in the person of Henry.
Yes.
Because he will not betray the church.
That's correct. Henry forces the dichotomy to happen.
Yes.
And More makes his choice very clearly.
Matter of fact, if it weren't for Henry, as much as a Catholic I would not call him a hero, you could probably say that he is at the root of separation of church and state in our own country.
Oh, absolutely.
Philosophically, we could trace it back to him.
That's exactly right, because what he puts in place at this time in the 1520s and 1530s, we would react against, almost 200 years later.
Much like More.
Much like More. That's correct.
So Henry would be the inciting incident. More would be why our model to respond with that.
That's right, because we all feared ending up like More did.
Let me interject here. First off, I want to compliment you on the spectacular use of dichotomy. You always pull those great $10 words out, and I love them.
Oh, thanks, sir.
We're talking about Thomas More. It's going to be a 10 shilling word, sir.
The 10 shilling word. As a heathen, he's not a big part of my experience.
Right.
So I want to challenge you. I want to push you a little harder here. I want you to make this more personal for you. You're talking about him being prolific. You're talking about that he sees church and state. Okay.
Go personal.
Why is he meaningful to you? What is it about him that makes him your hero? And why should we then see that and begin to pull that into our own life?
I can give it to you in one word, and it's More's own word itself: integrity.
Outstanding.
He coins the term, actually. It was not used before this. He's the one that actually creates that, although the concept is certainly not original.
Right. Well, it would have come from a Latin root. So
Right, exactly.
It's not. It's just a new way to phrase and use an existing idea.
Thomas More was an exemplar of being what he is, what he says he is. When he says something is his belief, you can take it to the bank. He believes strongly in the primacy of conscience. It's ultimately what he dies
That's an
for.
interesting phrase. I really like that. Primacy of conscience. Tell me some more about what that really means.
The loyal subject is bound to be loyal to his conscience more so to any other thing. Those are More's words. And he does believe that in certain aspects, in his case, it is the belief that the king cannot claim the supremacy of the church. It's not to be given. He believes, yes, he believes it cannot be claimed because it's a spiritual supremacy determined by God.
Right. The church is a divine institution as well as a human one.
Right.
But you can't have the human one take precedence over the divine because that is unnatural.
That's
to a man
exactly
of
it.
faith. The thing about
His conscience would not, because he believes this. As he would say, it's not that I believe, but I believe. It's in the movie, it's in the play, and it's a bit of a nuance depending on how it's performed. But it really tells very clearly. He says after that, he says, "I trust I make myself obscure," because at the time he was trying to navigate the waters of not getting killed or imprisoned, but he would not be pushed only so far.
So what you're saying that you admire his stance of being true to himself,
Absolutely.
over being true to a sovereign,
Or a custom, or a way of doing things, or the way that he would not be moved.
And that was his pathway to faith, his pathway to divine inspiration.
No, I have to say he already had his faith, and he saw this as divinely inspired.
So is it the other way around?
It's the other way around.
That's exactly it.
He has his faith, and then that's his pathway to self-discovery.
While we do not, while you don't necessarily see this concept either well understood or well expressed always in the church, and by the church, when Francis and I talk about it, we mean the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Is this primacy of conscience? Because this is a concept that has actually made it into modern church documents. Vatican II, a lot of what has come out of that rests on this idea of primacy of conscience. In other words, God will hold you accountable for not only for what is real and true, but also your understanding of it.
Interesting.
So if my understanding of God, for instance, just to kind of go a little far afield here to kind of explain what this means. So if I'm in some remote area of South America and no one has brought the gospel to me, I've never heard of Jesus Christ, and yet I live a life that how I worship aside, that kind of external, but how I treat one another, and I treat the poor around me, how I treat my fellow man, how I treat my children, my wife, how I am a part of my small society. If all of those things would be seen as well, a good moral man would live that way, then the church says that it is evidence that you seek to live as God would have you live, even if you don't know that this is how God.
Yeah. So there's so many.
It's called
things
invincible
there.
ignorance.
There's faith as a building block to the complete human person.
Oh, absolutely.
Very much so.
And then there's also that eternal question of
Nice one. Very good. Very good.
of good works versus faith as the path to salvation.
But see, that's just it. For a Catholic, it's not versus.
Exactly.
It's a both and.
That's right.
Yes, and
There's
that
no
ties us
opposition
all right
relationship.
back to all of our discussions about deism and Franklin and Voltaire. It's interesting how things circle around.
More
when we
would
start
have
with a
been-
whole different person.
Eternal questions are eternal and universal.
That's right.
Oh wow, there you go.
More would have
There you
had
go.
if he had known Voltaire and all those things that he put forth.
they'd have been buddies.
They would have been exactly right, because More was very enlightened for his time. One of the things I like about him too is his not only primacy of conscience. That's a moral side to him. That's a personality thing to him. He also has many beliefs that are admirable. His belief in education was one of them. His 3 daughters, were the most educated women in England in a time where this was absolutely not unheard of, but opposed. But because he had
most men weren't even
that is so
educated.
Interesting, and that is a cornerstone of humanist thought.
Humanist. I'm glad we got to that word, because that is probably the best description for him.
This is the background. That's
right.
This revolution that's going on as he lives. This is Erasmus.
That's right. His good friend.
Good friends. Yes.
Yes, and this correspondence across the continent and with England in this humanist revolution.
And not just education for its own sake. This is, and you could call this an enlightenment, small e here, but that's exactly what he's trying to promote. In many respects, this is the forerunner to Voltaire and all those items that come later.
I want to run with this for a second.
Please.
So, humanist. Normally, when we think of that term today, we think of it as an anti-religious, secular concept.
That's right. It's not that.
Very much, and you're absolutely right.
But when you look at it from More's perspective, and really from the church's perspective, to be humanist is to be a moral person.
Yes.
And there is no other way to be a humanist.
And that's the only thing that's good for all.
It is respecting the inherent dignity of the human person.
I love it when we go here.
That is
I love it.
key to what mean to being fully human.
And you asked why More is personally attractive to me. He just nailed it. That's exactly right. Humanism, in all of its greatness, expounds the greatness of the human person, the individual person, never at the expense of the group, but all people.
And while also recognizing we are created in the image and likeness of God, we are not fully human apart from God.
Right.
We are fully human by the grace of God.
In all of our diversity.
I'm telling dick jokes and talking about big metal hoopy tubes, and you guys are, this is tremendous stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, I worked it in. I got big metal hoopy tubes.
We were talking about that. We've been trying to do that for a long time, trying to figure out how to get that one on tape. We finally did that.
Talking about
I
that.
Sure didn't expect it to come in the Thomas More
episode. No.
But that's right.
And I got to inject some heathen stuff in there, but this is amazing stuff. So I love this opening, this window into you guys.
And the beauty of and one of the things that I didn't know when I first saw that movie, and I keep going back to that movie because that was my spark. That was the thing that started with me. Almost every word that More speaks in that movie, which is from the play, which Robert Bolt took, is adapted from More himself. He said this stuff. He had these moments.
Literally his own words, not made up.
That's correct.
We think he sort of said stuff.
That's right, yeah. Because, as we know, we've got these huge volume of a corpus of his works. It's not difficult to figure these things out. His trial, in particular.
Well, yes, that would have been recorded anyways.
Absolutely. And all that, the huge dramatic scene at the end with him on trial, those words he speaks are his words. I mean, they're adapted for the screen, yes, of course, and they're done in modern English. And in a dramatic fashion, but ultimately there's nothing, it's whole cloth from what he did here, and it's astounding, really, that he is willing to die for his beliefs.
That's a great point, because very few modern people, and I say this not to be negative, it just shows the depth of him. Mm-hmm. But very few people, I think, are truly willing to die for what they believe in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, we might be willing to die for abstract concepts. There are a lot of people willing to die for their country. Right? That's something you believe in. But when it comes to things like faith or philosophical concepts, no.
That's right. Especially in the face of the entire society that is lined up against you. He was truly a man alone.
That's one of the reasons why martyrs are saints.
That's right.
Because it is such an extraordinary thing. One of the things about More that speaks to me is a lot of what you've talked about, but I didn't really discover him, never saw the movie, I don't think, until after I became Catholic. Because as a convert, he just wouldn't have been on my radar. Because before I became Catholic, I too was a heathen. I was not even baptized. I was heathen in the truest sense of that word. And so learning about this kind of man in the early years of being Catholic, and then of course now the parish I'm at is St. Thomas More. So to me that's even better. That kind of thing is a truly inspiring thing, because you have a man who is willing to die not just for what his philosophical principle. This is truly integral to his faith.
He gets a bum rap from the anti-religious or anti-Catholic side, thinking, well, he was just stupid. And I think that really is a disservice to him, very much so. And I will also submit,
stupid for
dying.
For dying, okay, not intellectually.
No, nobody would ever challenge his intellectual prowess, and his and at the time he was well known. The fact that he did not write a statement against Henry on this issue. They say it in the movie. His silence is bellowing up and down Europe because his reputation was so. He was Chancellor of England.
Right. He's well known.
He is well known.
Oh yeah. We scratched just the bare surface of the accomplishments of his life.
He is Chief Justice and Attorney General, all rolled into one.
Right, and an incredibly trusted counselor for many years.
He is, absolutely.
And not just counselor, he's truly friend. Henry VIII was called the defender of the faith. Many believe that it's More that wrote
give me Latin
everything,
real quick.
Defensor Fidei.
Yeah, Fidei Defensor.
Yes.
Fidei Defensor.
That's right, which was the actual Latin term. It was an award that the Pope gave to him.
Gave to Henry.
Henry. No other English king had ever received this honor to do this. And it was because of a book that he wrote.
Although some think More had a great deal to do with it.
That's actually addressed in the movie a little bit, because Henry actually did write the book. More contributed to it.
Yeah, the question is how much did he
contribute? But apparently, as he says in the movie, it was first and last king's own project. Because Henry... He considered himself a good son of the church at one point.
He did. He died thinking himself a good Catholic man.
Ironically enough.
Which you could make an argument for that case. I think it's a stretch, but that's mainly a stretch because of what his daughter Elizabeth did. Because she's really the one who created the Anglican Church.
Yeah.
Really, that's where the
Henry put a lot of pieces in place that would come to it, but they might not have survived if it weren't for, because his daughter Mary undid a lot of them in her short reign, and it was Elizabeth that cemented them in. Right. So the cement was hardened by the time she was done. There's no going back.
Absolutely.
But one of the things I think about More is he is not just a Catholic hero. He is a hero for the ages. A man for all seasons is a very good way of putting it.
It's an apt description.
It's an apt description. That's very well put. Because we should all learn about him. Because somebody who believed in learning, who believed in the human person, who believed in the general goodness of mankind. That is More. He is somebody that was not afraid to argue his points. He was brilliant at the way, as a lawyer would be. He has the ability to take what he believes and translate it in such a way that will make you believe true. That's an amazing quality.
I think the thing about More that is and should be universally appealing to people are these stands he takes, because they should be, especially in this country, they should be recognizable by almost anybody. And I don't mean necessarily the particular points about the king being over the church, but the fact that he would not let the state bully him into doing something his conscience would not allow.
He is the patron saint of religious freedom. He's also the patron saint of lawyers and statesmen. Those are official. Yeah. I prefer to think, and this is something we haven't talked about, I prefer to think of him more as the patron saint of a Catholic household, of a family.
Yes.
He's a family. See, we didn't even get into any of this, Tim. Because of his, I don't want to say aristocracy, because he was not that. He earned his way to where he was. But his household, being chancellor, and even when he was counselor before that, he educated in his home his daughters, his children. They prayed regularly together. He had not only He has 3 daughters and 1 son, but he also had an adopted daughter, a stepdaughter, and a ward that were all part of his family. And Moore was very much in charge of this. He even had a menagerie out the back, as a matter of fact. He was, in many respects, the great father figure to all of these.
And his chancellor is an extension of that.
Yeah, and his absolutely, because he's chancellor. You have you're the shepherd of the realm in a secular fashion, in a judicial fashion. Moore lived that. See, there's that integrity.
A father of the nation.
That's right, exactly. He is, and he's also father to his household, to his family, to his wife, to his children, and that is a fascinating subject.
If you all will permit me, I'm going to open up a window here a little bit. Listeners, I don't know if we've talked about this in any of the episodes so far, but, we're not just 3 guys who met last week and sat down here and started doing this.
No,
this is not an artificial thing. Nobody's put us together.
We've been together for a long time.
35 years.
That's right.
And these are the kind of discussions that we have. Somehow or another, it seems like to me, no matter where we start, whether we start with Elizabeth II or Thomas More or whoever, Jack Kirby, we seem to always come around to this concept of the completeness of the human person, the value of the human person. And to a degree, what we're talking about here is individuality. And I don't mean individuality in a shallow sense of, well, I wear 5 earrings and my hair is purple. I'm talking about the individuality of your conscience, of your beliefs, for you guys, your faith.
It's not a question of expression.
Exactly.
Right. It's not the externals you see, it's the internals.
The internals. We always seem to end up here, and I'm fascinated. Again, Moore is not in my pantheon, but I end up in a lot of the same places from other directions. Nietzsche, which would seem like a whole different place to be. But one of his things is, there's a quote of his, you can't pay too high a price for owning yourself. And to me, that's a lot of the same things you're talking about here. The conscience, the completeness of a human person.
That's you can't pay enough to own your own self is a great way of stating exactly what Moore was about the primacy of conscience. Because if he had let Henry bully him into doing that, he would have been forever Henry's creature.
Yes. He's no longer his own man.
And he believed that he would pay the eternal soul. His soul would pay the eternal price.
Right.
He was very clear with that.
So listeners, this isn't just bourbon talking, even though we like to have the bourbon with us. And we do have a couple of glasses.
We do, absolutely, that's right.
I've got Makers. What did you say you had?
I have the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. For my money, this is the best you can buy short of a Pappy Van Winkle.
I love the color. It is a wonderful,
dark,
deep amber. Yes.
There's no water in yours, though, right? Yeah.
No, actually, there is. I put some ice in here because my soapstone cubes they weren't as cold as they were.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
That's actually watered down a little.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful color. Now, I'm still a huge fan of the Angel's Envy that we had a few episodes ago. So I appreciate you all letting me open that window. And I think that's important for people to see. This is a big deal to us. We're really trying to put something into this and let it take us somewhere special.
Yeah, the best discussions always involve the human condition and an exploration of that. And that's always where we end up, because that's what I think makes this podcast so daggone good.
It's funny you should say that, because that made me think of, one of the things that we have in common is where we met.
Yes.
That's right.
We met at what is now Bellarmine University.
That's right.
Which is now Bellarmine College. It
was Bellarmine College.
And one of the classes that every person who went there had to take was Ultimate Questions.
Ultimate Questions. My son is taking it now.
That's right. And it has left its mark on us, because that's kind of where we always work.
That's what we do.
And we are not. I mean, again, listeners, It's two people with business degrees and one with a computer science degree.
Oh, art and business.
Art and business. We're not philosophy degrees here.
But we all had 3 semesters of philosophy
and it
at Bellarmine.
It tugs
liberal
at
arts education.
It tugs at us that liberal arts to explore this, to explore the nature of humanity.
It's the difference between being educated and trained.
Yep.
Oh, very well said, sir.
I really believe that's true. I sat
in
in one of our team meetings. I won't mention the where I work or the people in the meeting, but I talked about we joke around because it's all a bunch of guys in the room, and we know how guys are with each other, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
we talk about big metal hoopajus.
That's right. We talk about big metal hoopajus.
He got it in twice, folks.
That's right. So we're sitting there, and the guy that's on my smaller part of our team, part of the larger team, he went to Purdue University, as did my boss. And
wonderful university.
Yeah. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Purdue. But I always joke with the guy on my team that the only reason he got hired was because they both went to the same school. And we were just kidding around with each other about the schools we went to, and they were giving me grief about going to a liberal arts school. Mm-hmm. And it's like, liberal arts education is the best education because it teaches you how to think. It teaches you critical thinking. His response, the boss's response was, an engineering degree doesn't do that? It's like, no. You
not beyond the scope of that.
It's training.
Subject.
It's the difference between taking all math classes so you can be a mathematician and taking that liberal arts class so that you can understand what the math means to the greater world.
So you can be human.
Well, yes,
fully
that
human.
Too. It really is.
Yeah.
Eternal questions are universal, and they are timeless.
Mm-hmm.
They are ultimate,
mm-hmm.
and that's what we talk about.
They guide our lives, our families, everything.
And we do ourselves a disservice if we ignore them.
And we have to find some way to get there. And you use more.
That's right.
As a building block
more
of your
ultimately
faith
takes
to get
me there. That's correct.
And I get there in other ways, but we get to a lot of the same place.
We've had very similar backgrounds in many ways, even though we come from very diverse specifics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have
first generation college students, all 3 of us.
Yes,
that's right.
First generation college students. I'm a convert to the Catholic faith, but I was relatively unchurched growing up, even though my family roots are very, very Southern Baptist. I mean, like down home Southern Baptist. And then you've got our resident heathen, who is not Catholic,
right.
but went to Catholic high school and college.
And college,
that's
yes.
Right. And then we've got the lifelong Catholic over here with Francis.
Yeah, cradle Catholic.
And that common, if nothing else, Bellarmine College is the best thing that ever happened to me because it's where I met my best friends and where I met my wife.
Can't beat it.
And where I learned to be a complete human.
That's right.
That's it. Yes.
I wish at the time I knew what was happening to me. I realize now later.
It's better to go through without. Yeah, it's better to go through without realizing.
Well,
I think
I would. Yes and no, because I wish I had realized a little more. I wish I paid a little bit more attention to some things. I wish I was a little bit more active in that.
Yeah, we wouldn't have had as much fun though.
Well, that's probably
if we were
true.
looking at it in the same way we look at it now.
I don't necessarily mean that.
Well, if we could go back in time and talk to our 25-year-old selves as we are now, we'd have a lot of things to say.
Oh, well, everybody would, yeah.
But all of the experiences, not just the learning ones.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Make you who you are.
That's right.
And it makes us why we're a good team. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, yeah, maybe we're listeners. Maybe you don't think we're a great team of 3, but we think we're a great team of 3.
Yeah.
Education 3 is
matters.
a magic number.
Yeah, education. It is. Yeah, that's right.
So
the 3 in 1. I mean, you can't get much more Catholic than that. Even when you're not Catholic,
we're a Trinity.
That's right.
We're a Trinity. All right. Well, Francis, wrap us up.
Yeah, it's Moore is truly my hero. If you had to pick one, as my high school English teacher would say, if there could only be one who was true and everybody else was false, who would you pick? For me, it would have to be Moore. He is someone who I look up to. I see him in my life. I see the parallels at times. He was well spoken, and he was never unreasonable. But there were certain things that he thought were worth giving the ultimate price for.
And we're challenged in our faith and challenged in our individual beliefs differently than he was. So
Sure.
I think it can be what's your word? Your favorite? Hubris.
Hubris.
To compare ourselves too much to him.
Yeah.
Obviously, he lost his life for his ideals, and we're probably in no danger of that. But
well, only because
we
we live
challenged
when
him.
we do, and he lived when he is. If he
Yeah.
was at that
we live in that
linchpin
free
point,
society, and we face different challenges to our faith.
in many respects, his martyrdom was one of those reminders to us as Americans today. This can't happen again.
He was martyred, so we
Can't,
don't have
as
to
in
be.
we
Must
shouldn't
not
let it.
We must not
Yeah.
let this
See,
happen again.
The thing that I think makes him a great martyr, which really all martyrs are heroes, but the thing that makes him a great, because martyr means witness, but the thing that makes him a great witness is that integrity. The whole point of the church naming martyrs as saints and other people as saints is that they are people that we look up to, that we aspire to be. That's why I say that all saints are heroes in that sense. And he is great because the things that he stood for, the things that were his crosses to bear, are things that even 500 years later we can identify with.
That's right. We still deal
Not
with them.
all saints are ones we can identify with. The ones that died in the Colosseum, we can recognize their heroism for dying for what they believe. It's hard for us to come up with an equivalent.
Yeah.
Railing against the bullying by the state or by anything, that's something that not just Americans, Jews in 1938 Nazi Germany would recognize that as something to look up to.
And that's one
It's
thing.
timeless.
That's right. And Moore is unique in the fact that he did write so much. We know him. We know him so well about what happened to him. It's all written down. He's so accessible compared to some of the others, as you mentioned, that maybe we have a line that says, yes, so-and-so died in the Colosseum. We know Moore. He is very human. He's very personable. And that on top of his being admirable is why I love him so.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week, same snake time, same otter channel.